Yeah, why don't we hop in as we do here, where I'll tell you about Possessor, what it happens, what it's about, and what are some of the themes, takeaways, and then we'll get to a bit of some of the scary tech that is out there and what we should be afraid of. Not so much like, is this plot possible? Though I would say if the technology were there, absolutely. Like, this is what they would use it for.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm going to talk about like the ethical concerns of it. It's like that kind of technology would be like amazing if we didn't live within the society that we do. And we didn't have the structures and systems in place that we do. It would be amazing. It'd be so cool. Like the intent and motivation would be just a whole different vibe. It would just be very interesting. Not the possessing of other people's bodies, but like being able to transfer your consciousness into a new body, or like even just like as you said, like making your brain go a different place. That would be super useful for a handful of reasons. But because of the government and what we know they love to do, there's no way it's going to be used for good. Yeah, like capitalism and all the other intersections, like they're going to play a part in how this technology is developed, especially when spearheaded by a man like Elon Musk. Because in capitalism, only the billionaires can have a say in what we do with their technology. So it's like, it's going to be a time that honestly, I think it's possible, if not now, or like it's already happened somehow in like the CIA land, or and we just don't know about it yet, or that it will likely have some capacity of happening either this way or another way. In the future.
That's just like, I feel like the gist of like any technology, when there's emerging technology, I get really excited about the potential and what it says for like the possibility of just making the world a better place, and that's what they advertise it as. And so I'm always just like, oh yeah, but the people who are in charge of it, like you said, it is going to be, billionaires. And we've already discussed on previous episodes that it is literally impossible for their brains and for them to be good. Like they cannot be good and be a billionaire. Like they do not have the capacity and the mental understanding, like an experience of the world. Yeah. So there's just
you could start from nothing and later, once you are a billionaire, be horrible. You know what I mean? Like you could literally develop that over time. Even like you could start normal and then transition gradually or drastically into awful as well.
Yeah, but you can't you can't be good and
you can't get to that
all that money. It's just not possible.
You have to sacrifice the humanity there to achieve.
All right, so Possessor is from the year 2020. And it is about an agent works for a secretive organization that uses brain implant technology to inhabit other people's bodies, ultimately driving them to commit assassinations for high-paying clients, and directed by Brandon Cronenberg. Let's just let me tell you what happens in there. Really more, so you get an idea. If you are going to watch the movie, trigger warning. There's obviously, it's a horror movie, there's a lot of violence, but there's also violence towards children that happen at the end. So I didn't know that was going to happen. You did, and that was rough. So just trigger warnings for anyone. And
the deaths are pretty brutal. Like additionally, like the other ones, they are all pretty brutal.
Yeah, they're very, very gory, and also just like the surrounding circumstances of the deaths is also really just troubling. So there's a lot of levels of horror that's happening. But let me tell you about Possessor. So Possessor is a gripping sci-fi horror movie that intertwines an existential identity crisis with a chilling undertone of commentary on the issues of data mining and surveillance. Set in an alternate near past of Toronto in 2008, we begin with a scene of a young Black woman sticking a needle and cord directly into her scalp. Like we start out with the gross. And we follow as Holly strolls through her workplace, a woman on a mission. And we spend little time with Holly before she stabs her client in the neck many times, far too many times than would be necessary. Like, you did it, babe. You did it. Right. And she then grabs a gun, her originally intended weapon that she had like dismissed for this knife that she saw that she thought, oh, that's better, and turns it on herself. She struggles with it, seeming to question the act and second guessing herself, before she is then confronted by police who predictably shoot her down. And you'd wonder at what drove poor Holly to do this horrible thing, to make this decision, and why she would kill this man and bring about her own death in such a vicious way. And it is then revealed that Holly had nothing to do with it.
Yep.
She was merely a vessel for assassin Tasia, who was a white woman and a hired serial killer. And I emphasize this because it's important. No matter how often people seem to move on from this unsatisfactory beginning in all of the reviews and comments about this film, it is important that that was a white woman inhabiting a Black woman's body and that she brought about her death. And I will talk about it later. Yep. So, because I will. Yeah. Take it or leave it. Like, either you like that commentary or you don't. Someone's got to talk about it, and not enough people are.
Yeah.
So back to the plot. Tasia works for a mysterious corporation using advanced mind-controlling technology to infiltrate the minds of those close to the targets that she's trying to kill for covert assassinations. And after completing the missions, she undergoes tests to ensure her mental integrity and to ensure her own mind hasn't been tainted by the cohabitation, because she like exists in that person's body for like up to 48 hours, I think. And so she's in that person's body, she's mimicking them and becoming them to a degree. And so when she comes back out, it's like, let's make sure you're good. Right?
Yeah.
Let's make sure you're still you. And we see like these little items that are tied to her past and her life. And it's kind of like, Inception with the anchors, like the totems they had. The purpose of them is like to make sure she's still her. And so that's our first glimpse into who she is. And so they like bring up these little bits and pieces. And one of the things that kind of defines her as like and confirms that she's like a person with feelings, is she has a butterfly that she had killed and pinned when she was a child, like to keep like in a shadow box. And she mentions that she did that and that she still feels guilty about it. And that's like a really important thing. And then she's also like reminded, like she does forget things about her life because she's like reminded that she's been estranged from her husband. Yeah. Right. And she's pressured to like leave that life behind. And clearly, like, that was the right answer. Her saying, like, this is what I did. I still feel guilty about it. It was the correct answer because that is true. That is usually what her answer is. But it is not the right answer for the employer who's like, that's not good enough. I don't like that that's your answer. Right? But we see that Tasia's true self is revealed as like a tabula rasa, right? This blank state, with even her personality, like her personal life, being scripted, where we see her rehearsing interactions that she'll have with her husband and son. She's like practicing like, hi, what's for dinner? Like, I love you. And she's like putting on the same act and performance that she does with when she's pretending to be another person. Like this time it's supposed to be with like her husband. So something isn't quite right with Tasia. And I mean, even beyond the regular issue of her being an uncaring psychopath capable of insidious murder, something's wrong with her even in that scope. She's breaking. Something's breaking in there because she faces inner turmoil after her last mission where remnants of her victim's consciousness linger. So she does fake the test to some degree, and she does. I don't think they're concerned enough. Yeah. So they buy it when she's like, no, I'm fine. And they're like, all right, whatever, I'll take it because if I decide that you're not fit, then I have to find somebody else.
Yeah, they don't care about her at all. And they just want her to just do the job. Do not care about her at all.
Well, she's so good at it, right? Yeah. Despite her unease, her ruthless boss, Gerder, who's played wonderfully by the Cronenberg alum, Jennifer Jason Leigh, she's been in a lot of his films, so it's cute she's in this one, compels her into a new assignment. It's like, get back in there, kid. And Gerda, acknowledging her own inability to undergo the process, aims to groom Tasia as her successor. She does the ulterior motives, and pushes her into that because she's trying to like disrupt her life. Like, don't get back and get cozy. You have to take over. I'm getting old. My brain can't handle the system, and you can. In the upcoming mission, Tasia assumes the identity of Colin, who is an ex-drug dealer dating the daughter of a powerful figure in a data mining company. And the client hopes to orchestrate a scenario where Colin, under the guise of a relapse, murders his future father-in-law and daughter, creating a strategic power shift. Which benefits the client, but also this mysterious company that can control people's minds.
Yes.
So they're like, oh, we get stakes. Like, we're going to be stakeholders in this company that's mining people's data and surveying the populace. Sure, yeah, let's give them the thing. Right? So it's like red flags.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah, it's red flags. And it's also like not really commented on. It's like, that's not what's scary. It's that she doesn't know who she is. I was like, that's not at all what it is.
The data mining is definitely very scary. There's a problem.
Which is funny because it really is like a subplot. It's like there, but it's not there. Unfortunately, Tasia's control has begun to slip, and she falls in and out of the narrative as Colin fights his way out of the sunken place. So the film follows as Tasia and Colin fight each other, with Tasia carrying out the mission messily. She does accomplish it, but it is like a long time. It's a lot of like fighting back and forth. And it is in these moments that like the actor for Colin, I'm totally blanking on his name right now, Charlie from Girls, who does wonderfully. There are times where I genuinely know he's Colin and I know he's Tasia. And there's also some editing moments where like their voices are melded to get like at the same time when they're like communicating. That was really eerie and cool. So it's like that's the whole film is them fighting each other. It's like she's in here and he's like, give me my life back. Saying that to like himself. So it's a little weird. And so after she successfully ruins Colin's life and identity, he gets the idea of revenge and sets his eyes on her family. Only it doesn't work out quite the way he intended. When Tasia reveals the depths of her malice, her family was actually holding her back from her true potential. And in the gory and traumatizing last acts of the film, Tasia, Colin, and Gerda take out her husband and child. So now Tasia, free from the inconvenient love of a family, can become the perfect, unfeeling killing machine and employee of the month.
Yeah, because jobs value you so much that you shouldn't care about your family.
No, they're holding you back. What if you could just work forever and you didn't have to go home? Cinematically, the film is a fever dream of reds and oranges, and Cronenberg's use of practical effects adds that extra layer of realistic unease. There's not like weird special effects and stuff like we saw with like his dad's recent movie had some weirdness in there. So watching as Tasia fights to hold on to her invasion of Colin while he in turn resists the programming is conveyed through fantasy sequences of them pulling at each other's flesh, their bodies melding and parting in desperation, and a representation of that internal battle made graphic and tangible. It's pretty cool. Those little sequences were like really insane. And I think elevated the experience. So on the surface, the film is a conversation about identity, right? She's literally taking someone's identity. She's becoming another person and warping how we experience them. So something that really stuck with me after the film was understanding the larger implications of this technology and the decision to invade regular, ordinary people with entire lives they've sculpted on their own and are now left with a tarnished legacy. I think of the family and friends who knew these people who are now questioning their relationships and reality. Right? Like, I thought I knew this person, right? And for me, it was like the worst cruelty to wear their face with the intent to ruin their history. Like, to ruin what we perceive them to be. And the one thing we have left when we leave this world is our impact and interaction with others, and they've destroyed that. And it's truly monstrous. And even more so, I feel like, than the invasion of privacy and data mining woes that dominate the narrative. Like, that's the thing that really stuck with me, is like, if you could come through and someone can, in one vicious act, completely change how everyone perceives you, which happens with like people who, falsely accuse other people of crimes. Your whole world changes. Because now people perceive you as this monster, this that you've done these horrible things. And in that premise of the film, like, they are doing those things, but they're not. So like that's the thing that just, like, I could not get over that. Like, I kept getting stuck with that. I was like, you're ruining their history.
Yeah. And like, not even like the murder itself is traumatic, but like also like the doubt of like reality that every single person, like you said, like is going to experience, is going to be like mind altered. Like, it's going to hurt like their entire perception of reality. Like everyone's going to be traumatized extra because like it's just so uncharacteristic of what we thought or what they thought they knew about this person.
Yeah. And they would have otherwise been completely correct. That is what that person is. And now all of a sudden they're not that anymore. Like, you've ruined their legacy. Like, anything they've ever done in their life, they could have been the most amazing human. You've ruined it. And they had no power in that. Yeah. So that, to me, I was like, that's a horror. I get all the other stuff and absolutely valid. This was a horror. And I'll bring that'll come back up because there's a very specific horror in this case where someone's specific life was ruined that I think should have been thought about more. Yeah. So Cronenberg, in an interview in RogerEbert.com, the article is titled "Psychological Infections. Brandon Cronenberg on Possessor," explains some of the inspirations for the film, one being his own struggle with being a person, acting the part, and not recognizing yourself in the mirror. Specifically talking about, like, he was going on tour and going through festivals and stuff for his first film, and just feeling like he had to put on airs, right? And he said, I was finding myself waking up in the mornings and feeling like I was sitting up into someone else's life and having to scramble to construct a character who could operate in that context. So I wanted to make a film initially about someone who may or may not be an imposter in their own life, as a way to talk about how we create characters and narratives in order to operate as human beings. And they do say, like she said, that, like, what's the narrative? Right? Like, what is the story that we're weaving that's supposed to be believable about this person? Like, that's why they try to paint it as he's relapsing. And the Ghouls have talked quite a bit about, like, in the past, about the fear of losing oneself in your work and in appearances with craft for the social world. So you can watch our Cam episode, Severance, and I'm sure there's others. It's a real fear to play a character long enough to forget who the original one was. It's that's also scary, right?
An additional layer to that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but like, is like, something that bothered me about the character from the onset was like, it also is a very pointed way to describe masking as like an autistic person from my own experience. And like, I didn't like that that person had to be a murderer, as like we always kind of see, unfortunately. But like, it also very much speaks to that. Like, if you have to put on a show for the people in your lives, if you're not in a place yet where you feel safe in your skin. So
yeah, especially like the moments where she is practicing to be with her family, because she's not pretending to be a whole new person. She's pretending to be the person that her family expects her to be. And so that's a really like heavy layer of, like, even in her own life, she is like masking, right? She's like, okay, I have to like put on the social face. And absolutely, it's the fact that she's a murderer kind of takes away any power that message could have. Just putting certain people into places of power, or putting them into victimhood.
And I am in no way diagnosing through the media that character was autistic. I'm just correlating the mask element of it, because she was the problem. But
no, she was just a psychopath.
It's different. It's different.
No, absolutely. Thank you for clarifying. People are listening. One of the bigger threads of commentary is found on the in the company Girder and Co. Who that they intend to hostily take over. Right. So Colin works as a lower level employee at a data mining company. And here he enters a virtual office and spends his days watching people through their webcams to gather information about their lives. I'm sure people will now have like tape over there. I do. Mine has a little, it's like a little slider. So the information, this is what was, I think, one of the best parts of the film. The information that he's looking for when Tasia pretends to be him is on the drapes and curtains in people's homes. Is that like, that's the guise of what they're looking at, right? Is, oh, we're seeing what kind of curtains people own. So this like completely mundane, boring, oh, that's harmless. But you're invading people's privacy to do it, to access that information.
And you're seeing much more than their curtains.
Yeah, so we watch the invasion of privacy as he cycles through the different webcams, eventually getting stuck on a scene in which two people are having sex. Right. And it's an absurd violation of privacy to know what color their curtains are. And I think like that, again, it's this absurdification that sci-fi does to exaggerate real problems. Because it's not that far off. Right. Like that, like they tell you less that they're like, oh, just accept these cookies, you know, those kind of things. Like, oh, it's a little cookies.
Did everyone read the terms and conditions? No.
Right. And as extreme and absurd as this moment is, it doesn't feel too far off. And so data mining companies and other invasive technologies operate under the guise of gathering only the unimportant minutiae of our daily lives while actually getting a lot more information out of us.
And watching selling it to the government, selling it there, just giving it to law enforcement if they have a warrant for it.
So Cronenberg, in that interview that I mentioned previously, shares the surveillance horror inspiration, saying, I was approaching it in different ways in the film, partly through surveillance. I mean, the Snowden leaks happened as I was writing it. I was feeling a lot of despair at the thought of the death of privacy through technology, and that made its way in. And I'll admit, I do not know a lot about data mining other than like the general idea, right? And I fear all new technology that tries to convince the public it's harmless and nothing to worry about, doth protest too much, in my opinion. So I was telling Kat before this episode, I was like, new technology, I always be like, this is for accessibility and other benevolent things. But then behind that is a sign. That sign is a factory of smoke and brimstone with a monster maniacally laughing as they gather all of our information into a boiling pot of control and sublimation. And so that's how I feel about all technology. I'm like, okay, sure, yeah. No, it's fine. It's going to be so good and helpful for people.
But like, we're going to make it like $10,000 per month, you know, like they do with the leukemia drug, you know, like life-saving stuff. You have to pay $160,000 a year for it.
Only certain people can have their lives saved.
Yeah. But so it's for the good of everybody.
Yeah.
It's fine.
It's not for money. Everything's for money. In a super helpful article on Medium titled On Possessor, Data Mining, and Labor Alienation by Noble Dude, they press the details of the process and why we should fear it. So it's super helpful if you want to learn about data mining from someone who did it and gets it, because I don't. So here's what they said. Data mining is central to tech. Data mining is the future of human labor. These days, one of the most lucrative businesses you can invest in or own is a consulting company whose only purpose is to hire low-paid workers around the world to feed algorithms, usually at the behest of some tech company. Some of these jobs are pretty straightforward. Maybe you get to transcribe ads or newspaper articles, or maybe you end up transcribing voice recordings. The idea is this data will be used to improve smartphone apps aimed at disabled people or later used in the creation of innovative software. Maybe. Most of the time, however, these jobs demand tasks that get incredibly abstract and strange. It's all hard to gauge since there's a severe lack of transparency in the industry.
As well as regulation.
Yeah. So we have the trouble of not fully understanding the roles that we play in these elaborate ploys for information and control. Further, Noble Dude explains how, due to the virtual element of the job, much of the work is outsourced, allowing for the companies in charge to underpay their employees and avoid labor laws, restrictions, and basic human decency. This disconnection from our role in the work contributes to a larger problem and the core theme of the film, according to Noble Dude, which he explains is worker alienation. Right. So Noble Dude draws a connection between the film's villainous corporations and Karl Marx's concept of labor alienation. The idea is that as the pace and intricacy of production increases, laborers gradually become detached from the products they manufacture. The emergence of factories during the later stages of capitalism transformed production into a series of interconnected processes involving the construction of individual components that contribute to larger entities, ultimately destined for sale and consumption. But we don't always see the bigger picture because we're in the first step or the third step in the conveyor belt of creation, right? So he compares the work of a shoemaker who is involved in all aspects of creation with the shoe to the work of someone making screws, like in a screw company, right? Screws that will then later be used in war tanks. So like with a shoemaker, they understand exactly every little like small piece that goes into the designing of the shoe. They know what it's going to look like in the end, and they know all the work that went into it. For the screw factory, you're just making the screw, and that's it. You did it. You did your job. You don't know what they're using those screws for. So they are so far removed from the final result that their contribution to a larger issue like war is lost on them. And Noble Dude claims data mining is the most extreme and abstract version of this alienation, and completes his thorough examination of data mining and is this alienation. And again, I highly recommend this article to learn more about this whole process, by tying it to the severity of job performance, saying the thesis at the center of the gruesome climax is that we have secretly internalized capitalism's promise to such an extent that, yes, it is worthwhile, desirable even, to destroy and sacrifice everything you have and are in order to excel at your job. I mean, be honest. Don't you want to be really good at your job? Isn't that the only purpose in life? And that is the final message in the film. When we see Tasya finally shrug off the inconvenience of family and love of her regular life, right? Now unburdened, she could be the perfect killing machine. This is confirmed when in the final moments, Tasya is tested as she had been earlier in the film, only this time she reveals no lasting feelings of regret or anything that makes her remotely a caring, feeling human being. When she pulls out that butterfly, she says, I killed this when I was younger. That's it. I don't regret it. I don't feel guilty. Right. So, and then, Gerder's like, did it.
Excellent. That was the goal all along.
And now the last thing I'll speak on is important and unfortunately underreported on. So the first life that we see Tasya and her company destroy is Holly's, who is a Black woman whose body is commandeered by a white woman for destructive purposes, an act that leaves her dead at the hands of a police firing squad, specifically, right? And at best, and in giving the film entirely too much credit, which we sometimes do, like sometimes we'll be like, if they were thinking, perhaps this is what they're trying to say. Like, we're trying...
The media analysis.
Yes, we're trying to say maybe this is what you meant to do. So we're going to try to, So at best, right, it is remarking on the cruelty of white people possessing Black bodies or benefiting from Black harm. At worst, it's a massive and tragic oversight, and the implications of harming this Black body is as overlooked by the audience and reviewers as it was in the film. Right? I found 3 reviews that speak on this issue, 2 of which simply mention it and move on after briefly praising the film on its flimsy, possible intentions. So like when I said at best, if we're giving them all the credit, that's what those 2 reviews were doing. One review I found on Slant Magazine titled Possessor Review, Identity Theft as Nihilist Nightmare. Writer Chuck Bowen attempts to credit the presence of commentary with a slight critique on the brevity of the moment, saying Cronenberg doesn't elaborate further on the racial implications of the film's first scene, which essentially functions as a self-contained short. One of several riffs here on the alienating possibilities of the supreme mental hijack, which the filmmaker eventually contrasts with corporate data mining, an altogether more relatable kind of invasion. So they're like, it exists, it's very short, but it's there. The other one was like, oh, good, he did that. It's like, no, what? Again, I've read a lot of reviews, just 3 of them I caught even mentioned Holly, right? The third that I found, and it was after digging, spoke the full truth and despair that I felt when I was watching this Black woman's life and legacy be destroyed at the manipulative hands of white people and white corporations. So on Electric Literature, there's an article titled White Audiences Are Obsessed with Black Martyrdom, and writer Celia Madison shares her thoughts in their overall critique of using Black bodies as martyrs for white messages. And she starts with, I watch over and over again as this Black woman dressed in an unsophisticated cerulean uniform stabs a man she's being paid to serve before dying horrifically in a hail of police gunfire. A brief cruelty that lingers, made even more gruesome when you catch that moment of defiance in Holly. So Madison says, she's unable to pull the trigger, her hands trembling on the grip. Here I think I see Holly emerge, wrestling control from Voss, resisting this posh white woman from an unseen get-out sunken place. I imagine Holly acting on one of our most basic human instincts to self-preserve, one of our most ingrained instincts to resist white dominance. And Madison questions the lack of notice by those around Holly, which is what really struck me, because I was like caught up on like her, like how one, it is just visceral. It's just awful for that to be the first thing that we see, and then to learn like it wasn't even her. So I was thinking about how her life is ruined, but she's talking about like the fact that like no one even knew, to our knowledge, that she wasn't Holly, right? And so when we spend time with Colin in the film, which is a lot longer, we watch as others are quick to notice him acting strangely, right? So Tassia had gathered only necessary information on behaving as him, and understandably missed the small nuanced pieces of a person that others who know them well would sense as wrong or different. So for this, it's does no one notice that Holly is strange, right? And Madison even asks, if someone were to notice and report it, would anyone care to investigate? Saying, in the betrayal by someone who watched you long enough to package your life, but not enough to recognize your humanity. It's what makes the sunken place so existentially frightening. In a world where we as Black women are still allowed so little freedom of movement and expression, the idea that we could further have our personhood stripped from us and that nobody would notice is horrifying. And that like hit that extra mark of like, they didn't even see her. And because it's reflected in the fact that, similar to what we were complaining about with Don't Worry, Darling, right? Is like you put this person here and you didn't think about it. Or you didn't think long enough and you weren't intentional enough to think about the weight that their presence had, and you treating them this way on screen would have on the people who are watching it who look like her and live her life. Right. Further, with Holly's Blackness, unlike Colin, there is a confirmation of closure in this case. And she says, and if Vaz's Holly failed to execute the suicide, there's no chance of Holly leaving the building alive. Her Blackness is a failsafe. No Black person is politely escorted out of the building in handcuffs after committing murder. She goes on saying, like, they're not giving them pizza, which is like remarks about some other serial killers we've seen, or mass murderers. So this interaction with authority is representative of a bigger issue, a complex and institutional understanding. And I am really thankful for Madison speaking on an issue that haunted my experience of the film. right?
Mm-hmm.
Changing me and Kat's interpretations of the film. Like right out the gate, we were both like, ugh.
Oh yeah.
Like like we purposely had to be like, we're gonna like when like I even said it, I was like, I'm gonna pocket that.
Yeah,
I'm
because
gonna put that
otherwise
in
we're
a
going to turn it
pocket.
off and we can't.
But then I brought it, like it was like 10 minutes later, I brought it back up because I couldn't, because I was like, okay, but another thing, she's on the screen for 7 minutes and I could only think of her the whole film.
Yeah.
Like every
And
time
also,
anyone else did something. Go ahead.
And it's like the lack of care they did in even preparing for her. Kate, like you don't see the prep that went into Colin. You know what I mean? Like they were just counting on her being perceived in that way. Like it was just really gross.
Mm-hmm. And it's like she's wearing like, there's also the element of she's wearing a wig. There's like all these like added layers. It's like this is a person who doesn't understand how to like be her, and they never considered that. Mm-hmm. And like that to me is just as malicious as if they strategically did that. Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, it like literally 7 minutes, and I like kept they're like, okay, we'll come back to that. And I was like, I'm coming back to it. I'm bringing it back up. Because we, like Madison, were immediately disrupted by the violence and the decisions that must have led to that specific scene playing out the way that it did. Right. Mm-hmm. And even again, if we're giving them the credit that is due, they didn't do enough. If that was the intention, they didn't say anything about it.
Yeah.
So they didn't. They just hurt us and then moved on and was like, yeah, this hurts, right? So Madison ends their amazing article. Highly, highly recommend. Please go read it. With a heavy thought that continues to linger with me even now. And she says, when I rewatch the film, I hope that as Colin fights for control over his body, he senses someone resisted before him. Like so many others searching for self-determination, he might find that a path has been cleared by a Black woman before him. Maybe as his hands were unable to pull the trigger and he unsuccessfully tried to regain control of his body, he recognized that someone else had been here before him. And as I replay Holly's 7 minutes again and again, I try to tease out the lines of Graham's short, startling performance. I want to trace when Holly emerges and Vaz falls back. I want her to know that someone noticed when she was gone. So that's my section. I was like, I was like, yeah, I'll talk about technology, but I can't get over this. And so I was so like very thankful that I found that one article, but it really like broke my heart. Like even now, I'm like, oh God. So it's a mess.